Thank you so much for joining us for another awesome episode of Bioenergetics Beat. I'm Heather Gray, a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and certified bioenergetic practitioner. And this episode is brought to you today by Nikki, Unleash the Wellness Within. It's an easily affordable, highly effective approach to optimize wellness. It's a wearable device that puts frequency better based life in your hands and on your wrist. Make sure to stick to the very, very end because, as usual, we've got an amazing giveaway that you're not going to want to miss out on. But you're not going to want to miss out on one word that my next guest here has to say. I've been chasing her down for quite some time. I fell in love with her years ago when I saw her speak at a microbiome conference in Denver, Colorado, and then started learning about her more through Mindshare. And she's just an amazing powerhouse female that's just trailblazer of talking about trauma and psychedelics and all the things that are needed to help heal the mental health crisis that's going on in our world today. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Maya to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yay, I'm so excited to have you. This is one of my all-time favorite subjects to talk about because of my own history with mental health stuff, being gaslit by the medical community for so many years gone of my life, so many people suffering. I mean, we just had Beth O'Hara, of Mass Cell 360 commit suicide not too long ago. Like, this is a conversation that needs to be on top of the mountain, screamed as loud as it possibly can, because obviously we haven't shifted the paradigm enough, right? So I would love to talk about, I know you've got a book out, but I'd love to find out, have our people find out more about you. Like, how did you get started? What kind of a doctor are you? What made you want to go that route? And why are we talking about psychedelics and all that fun stuff?
So I am a conventionally trained adult and pediatric neurologist. So I was triple boarded and did the whole conventional medical thing. And pretty promptly, because of actually an illness that my youngest son had. So during my training, I had 3 children over the course of my training. And
Holy cow.
yeah, I was people asked me how I did that, and obviously people were like kind of impressed and thought I was a little crazy. And now, I always say, how did I do that? Trauma.
Yeah.
Right? Because we like figure out how we can be super, super busy all of the time and never give ourselves a break. And like that ends up being part of it for sure. And but yeah, so my youngest son, in the end of my neurologic training, started to have real health challenges that they looked like asthma, but there was also kind of a neurologic like regression. And it ended up actually being a mold issue as it happened. But the way it presented was actually a soy allergy. And I had no idea that that was what was going on or that food could cause that. And here I am in my training. Nobody believes food does anything, obviously, in like any kind of mainstream environment. And so ultimately, I had to do all this detective work. I had to convince allergists to test him, et cetera, et cetera. And it took this whole really significant journey down a rabbit hole to figure out how to recover him from whatever the insult at the time was. And I was already holistic. I was already studying with the program for integrative medicine at University of Arizona. I was actually joined the faculty there. So I was like becoming an herbalist at the same time. And still, it was a huge journey to get him back to where he was. It ended up being the topic of my book, The Dirt Cure, which was my first book. It came out in 2016 with Simon and Schuster. And then a number of years later, there I was doing all my holistic things, feeling like I could help anybody. And we had this big mold remediation we needed in the apartment. So I had to move out for 5 months while they were gutting different parts of the apartment. I got rid of all my upholstered furniture. It was very dramatic. So I had we were a family of 5 and a dog. And my son, the same son, my youngest of my 3 kids, was again very sick, differently very sick. And so we got out of the apartment. He was doing really well. I lived in New York City at the time. And then we moved back in 2 weeks into living back in the apartment. I'm talking, it was cleaned with toothbrushes. Like, we got a professional cleaning done. They tested for mold. There was nothing. Everything had been gutted to the studs where there was mold. So it was absolutely, um, clean. And he had a first time seizure in the bathroom that had been the epicenter of the mold. But like, there was no mold in there because everything was brand new. The wall was new. The tile was new. There was no leak. There was no nothing. And he was locked in the bathroom. He was 7 years old. And I like was about to literally break the door down because I couldn't get to him. And he came out then, kind of staggered out, and it was really clear he had had a seizure. And here I am, pediatric neurologist, probably the one holistic person that anyone would have sent their kid to. At that time, there were no really other pediatric neurologists doing that kind of work. I'm really in the world, and I was seeing people at that time from all over the world, and I'm holding him in my arms, and I just knew with my whole body that this was more than just a physical issue. I felt like this was energetic. It was spiritual. It was like a soul illness. It was something so much deeper and different than I had ever treated. And I knew that I didn't know how to treat it and that I was going to have to seek. So nothing like, the motivation of like someone in mama bear mode. And I ended up really starting to learn with I ended up learning with an indigenous teacher, actually, and spiritual teacher. And I actually traveled to Ecuador ultimately and started to study with indigenous elders and really learned a whole new approach to healing. Now, I went down there to learn about indigenous healing. Nobody ever talked about psychedelics or master plants as being anything anyone was going to consume. And had I thought that that was what was going to happen, because that was, by the way, like now it's really part of the conversation. At that time, way back, it was not, right? That son is now like a strapping 6'2" college kid. But at the time, he was still like a little boy, and we weren't in this world that we're in now with all this like exciting research around psychedelics. I don't think I would have gone as the mother of young kids, as a doctor, as all this, if I thought there would be any actual psychedelic ceremony in this experience that I went to in Ecuador, because that's not how it was shared. But there was some of that, and it really changed my life. And as is often the case, and I say this as a doctor and coach of people who are going through healing their own trauma and their own really catastrophic or chronic illness, very often we think we're going on a journey to help a loved one, a family member, somebody in our lives, and it ends up really being our own healing journey. And for me, that was very much the case. I never would have done it. I never would have put myself in that position to do my own personal healing at that time. But the universe had different ideas for me. So that is my story and why I have this very broad array of different ways that I work with people and healing.
You're such a badass. Like I said, I just can't get over. So tell us just a little bit more about the dirt cure. What was that about?
So the dirt cure was really about healthy families and how, being dirty, right, which means being exposed to germs and microbes, eating fresh food from healthy soil, and being out in nature are the foundations of being healthy children, healthy families, healthy people. And that book, I mean, it is very thorough on the science. It's still, I think, very current and relevant. And I have a whole chapter on water. I have a whole chapter on milk. I have a whole chapter on meat. I have a whole chapter on grains. Like, you want to like have like these deep dives, you want to look at like germ theory and where we can take that apart and why the terrain is so much more important than the germ. You want to look at how nature, how sunshine, how looking at nature can totally change your health. All of those things are kind of codified in that. Last year, I wrote another book called The Master Plant Experience. It actually just got a gold medal from the IPPY Awards, the Independent Publishing Awards. And that book is about healing trauma. It's about our connection to the natural world, to master plants and psychedelics, and also just like kind of the spiritual journey, like how we hit these very difficult times in life sometimes. That could be health challenges, that could be personal challenges, that could be professional challenges. And a lot of times, not to say that they always have meaning, but that we can make meaning of them and use them as medicine in our lives and for other people. And that is really how we can metabolize and alchemize our trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you had brought up that after he came out of the bathroom, you knew it was like a bioenergetic, family lineage, like deeper than just the mold in the room. And it's so true. So many people, it's so sad. I got bit by a tick, so I got Lyme disease. Or there's this cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. And I'm always like, no, no, no. It's always something deeper. And it's been going back 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, generational, right? Like that we're just not aware of, that kind of sets us up to be a good host for some of these things that are happening in this world. But I see you brought up the mold. We got a mold frequency that I'm using on this guy right now, because I have just got exposed to mold and my brain is so inflamed, and it's just, mold is insidious. And good on you for gutting the whole house. It had to have been heartbreaking though, to move him back in and have him go into a seizure.
Yeah, no, and I think sometimes it's like there's a message coming, through an experience, just like you said, and like you didn't get the message loud and clear. So I thought, oh, if I just do all the things I know to do, and it was sort of like, hey, you can do all the things you know to do, but you also don't know. And I feel like that's a lot of what I've been learning for the past decade, has been how important it is to always not know and to be willing to be with not knowing and be in that kind of curiosity. Because the minute we think we know everything, um, then that's when we kind of get turned upside down. And because we're always learning, I mean, I'm an expert in many things, but I'm a lifelong learner, and I just try to always stay really curious.
Absolutely. Beautiful. This is a great spot. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dive deeper into some of the things of, what's a master plant versus a psychedelic? How can psychedelics help trauma, which can help balance and regulate emotions? We're going to dive deeper into the meat and potatoes of this conversation, which is going to be so much fun. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's Cam here, and I just want to take a few minutes and talk about my experience with this new device I just got. It's called a Nikki. I've never heard of this, but it actually like helps you via frequencies. And the cool thing is that like each frequency helps for different outcomes or different reliefs. So there's like a sleep mode. When I go mountain biking, I throw it on an energy booster. Once I'm done mountain biking, I actually switch it to the other mode they have, is pain and relief. Anytime after a hard workout, put it on. I'm confident this thing is really going to work based off of what I'm hearing, based off what I'm feeling. So I think the website is We Are Nikki. Really affordable for what this thing is. Nice and sleek. Check it out, We Are Nikki. I've been loving it so far.
Nikki puts a personal wellness center in your hands and on your wrist. Be better. Do better. WeAreNikki.com.
For someone thinking of purchasing a device, what advice would you give them?
Do it. Just do it. It's I really have explored so many way between essential oils. I mean, much of what the speakers said tonight, there's been my journey through the years. This is by far the quickest, the most painless. It's just really, for me, it was a synchronistic meeting, and I ended up being blessed with the device. So I feel that, universe is saying, we want you around for a while.
Nikki puts a personal wellness center in your hands and on your wrist. Be better. Do better. WeAreNikki.com.
Awesome. Welcome back. So excited to dive in a little deeper. So I heard you talk about master plants and psychedelics as they were two different things. So I always thought they were kind of the same thing. So can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so psychedelics, I think most people know a little something about. They're, this category of compound, probably most people would refer to them as, that help us, that alter us, right? And most people kind of associate them with like journeying or tripping, right? This kind of idea, and they think either back to the 60s or to their rave days, or they think of them as illegal drugs, right? But psychedelics could be like LSD, they could be, the magic mushrooms, ayahuasca, et cetera, et cetera. And so right now there's a huge body of research that's looking at the healing potential and healing outcomes, in fact, with all different kinds of really chronic, difficult to treat medical and mental health conditions, ranging from PTSD, OCD, addiction, all kinds of addiction, very serious addictions, traumatic brain injury, anxiety, OCD, sexual trauma, and even looking at things like autoimmunity, dementia, et cetera. Okay, so there is this incredible widespread research in all the mainstream academic institutions in the world right now. Okay, so that's psychedelics, right? Master plants are a little different. So master plants are an indigenous term, and I in no way speak for indigenous people, but simply sharing a approach, okay, where they think of certain plants, but really flora, fauna, fungi. So we're not being like strictly botanical here. So it could include mushrooms, for example. They think of them as masters, as teachers, and they talk about these master plants as being ancient teachers that transmit wisdom that humans need to navigate the human experience and change their consciousness. Okay. Now, most people don't know about master plants that they are so old and so embedded in the human experience that if you look at cave art, literal cave art, and I never knew this. I thought cave art was just like, oh, this little scribble scrabble, old primitive, this is what we did all day when we were cavemen kind of thing. That's how I learned it in like whatever, 4th grade. But in fact, most cave art, including from like 60,000 years ago and more, is not in the front of caves where there's light and where people would have been living. It's found in the depths of the cave where it is pitch black, low oxygen, areas where it would be ceremonial. And when these are discovered, they find pictures of mushrooms, of cacti, even DNA evidence of there being master plants, these psychedelic master plants. Now, not all master plants are psychedelic. Coffee is a master plant. Cacao is a master plant. Tobacco is a master plant. They're powerful, right? They are powerful plants. They don't necessarily cause you to have altered consciousness, but any psychedelic plant is considered a master. And in these communities, they talk about the master plants as mother, as father, as grandmother, as grandfather, because they're considered to be these revered, respected members of their community. So that's kind of the picture of psychedelics and master plants.
That's incredible. No, I mean, I've done cacao ceremonies and I was like, what's the point of a cacao ceremony? Because I thought everything was all psychedelics, but no, I didn't realize it was a master plant. So, and then, doing ayahuasca, they called her grandmother. So I didn't quite understand that. Now I know. It's incredible. So how does psychedelics and these master plants work on the brain? And especially when it comes to like healing trauma and regulating emotions and, diving deeper into that human experience?
Yeah. So there are, many levels to the way that we could think about this. And I go into a lot more depth in my book, but I'm going to give you a few examples. So I'm going to talk first from a cellular level, and then we'll get to kind of a more like nervous system kind of brain level. On a cellular level, when we experience any kind of trauma, and that can be big T trauma, like the ACEs, right? The adverse childhood events. There's a lot of research on this, that if you have someone, unfortunately, these are pretty common things, right? Like divorce and abandonment, and someone with addiction in the family, sexual, physical, verbal trauma, right? These are, some people have a lot more, some people don't have as much, but most people have at least some ACE score, right? During their childhood. So that's big T trauma, but there's also little T trauma, which could be like being bullied. It could be having a caregiver that was really not emotionally regulated and that you were always kind of like having to tap in, like, are they going to be angry today? Are they not going to be angry today? Or someone who just kind of neglected you a little bit or favored one of your siblings way more than you, right? Whatever it could be. That's more like little T trauma, but these are all experiences, particularly in childhood more so, and it can also, you know, we can obviously experience trauma later in life as well, but those experiences actually translate and embed in our cells. Okay, so a cell that that's functioning optimally even is structurally different. Literally, our mitochondria in our cells that are functioning optimally look like branched spaghetti, and they're all kind of like touching and communicating, and they're a community of mitochondria. Whereas in a cell that's in cell danger, right, where trauma has embedded into the cells are like meatballs. So they're like quarantined. They're not communicating. They're not releasing waste well. They're not exchanging nutrients well. They're like balled up. Okay. So even on that level, a cell in cell danger mode is not able to function the same way. And the thing is that the cells, when I say embedded, cells remember what happened to us. They understand not just physical insults, but also mental, emotional, and spiritual kinds of experiences and lineage, right? So what can happen is that our cells can live, they remember, and they have this embedded experience that then causes our cells to function differently. And that can happen for years, decades, lifetime, right? As you were saying earlier, that like, it's not just the tick bite, right? It's like this whole, you have to have experienced this kind of danger memory, right? It's like cellular memory. They remember what happened and they understand all of that. And then they translate it into physical and mental issues, right? So we walk around in sometimes like a compromised way and we don't realize it. All right. So that's kind of the background to this trauma that we're walking around with, big T or little t, right? And so then what do psychedelics do? Well, first of all, something has to happen, right? We have to interrupt that pattern. We have to interrupt what's happening on a cellular level and get the cell out of that cell danger mode back into this optimal regenerative, function. And we want to rewire, right? Because our body, our brain all wires in these very particular ways, hormonally, from a neurotransmitter standpoint, from a brainwave standpoint, on a vibrational level, our biofield, right? All of this is patterning, right? And it's like our unique signature. So what we want is what can help interrupt the patterning, the memory, this embedded way of being. And so psychedelics and masterplants are one way, right? And I don't think they are for everyone. I just want to kind of preface this by saying, I'm not like rah, 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 despite the fact that I wrote a book about it and I train people in psychedelics. I don't think that they're for everyone all of the time. And I don't think they're for everyone. But I do think they're life-saving for the people for whom they are appropriate. And there are a lot of ways to engage with them that do not have to be the big trip, the big journey, which we can talk about. There's also microdosing and quantum dosing, and all of them can be profound. So all of that to say, this is a rewiring kind of experience. It's interrupting that cellular memory so that you're not having your autoimmune disease. You're not in this constant allergy mode. You're not in brain fog. You're not in trauma mode all the time where so one of the things that psychedelics do on a nervous system level is they actually interrupt something called the default mode network, okay, DMN. And the default mode network is really important for ego and for our basically it suppresses all of our emotions and old childhood memories and traumas, okay, so that we can function out in the world and like do our day and survive and all of that stuff. That's very important. But because it's not really that convenient to think about old childhood trauma and feel big waves of emotions. The thing is, though, that right now we know that part of what's causing us a lot of suffering is actually related to these embedded, wired in things. So what psychedelics can do is actually shut down or suppress the default mode network, which allows us to access certain parts of ourselves and certain experiences that can be even not just our own experiences, but even lineage experiences, even like our epigenetic experiences, so that we can recalibrate and rewire and literally have new plasticity in our brains and in our bodies, so that what we've seen in a lot of the studies is that 1 or 2 doses in certain case of a psychedelic therapy, and this is always, I want to say, with professional support before, during, after. Okay, this isn't like, I'm not saying it couldn't be helpful, but like this is not, grabbing something and going out to the field and having, right? This is something that's a really professionally held experience. That 1 or 2 experiences can interrupt addiction that people have had lifelong, that can interrupt PTSD that people are totally debilitated by and have not had any response to medications, to therapies, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't remember his last name, but Bill, who founded AA, was talking about in the 1950s about psychedelics and mushrooms especially, and their role in helping overcome addiction, but that was the 1960s, and we're still having these issues, with addiction now. And it blows my brain that he was talking about that so long ago. And here we are, so many people still dealing with such debilitating addictions.
Yeah. He doesn't have a last name in any of the public.
Is that why I don't remember his last name? Okay, thank God. Because I've been in and out every now and then. Friends of Bill. Are you a friend of Bill? And I was like, who's Bill? But, oh yeah, no, I'm an A. But yeah, having addictions kind of ravage my whole family and childhood, and my brother being one of the worst alcoholics I've ever met. And then just knowing the help that I've gotten from psychedelics, and they were not a pleasant experience. Like if especially if you got the trauma that I do, it's not just this, I saw sunshines and roses and unicorns and my dead grandmother talk to me. Like this was depth deep. I heard cries come out of me and noises come out of me I didn't even know existed. Like it was hardcore. And I'm so glad that I did it, because each time it gave me a little more piece of my life back, a little bit more of my body back. I had a little more control over my emotional response and what I was reacting to, where I really didn't before.
Yeah. And that's where that life-saving component comes. Like if we look at even like eating disorders, they're looking at postpartum depression. I mean, we lose so many people to suicide. And I actually, am a family member of someone who died from suicide. And so this is something very near and dear to my heart, but we lose a lot of people from these traumatic experiences. And there are ways, and again, it's not always pretty, right? It's not, this is where, obviously there are people who have very wonderful psychedelic experiences. Most of mine have not been that way. And in fact, I don't really even have big experiences very much now, because I don't need to. I go in kind of a sacred way. And so for me, I feel like I'm still unpacking really important experiences I had a long time ago, and I don't need to keep going back myself. But what I will say is, we don't have a lot of ways to help people so thoroughly and so profoundly, even if it's difficult. And that's where the support comes in too, right? And it's also really important to note that a psychedelic experience can be difficult, or it can be wonderful, or anything in between, the whole gamut, right? But it's the most important part is not actually the experience itself. It's actually what happens afterwards. And so it's not that these are like magic pills or magic brews or anything like that, where everything's just solved. It's a portal, is how I would say it. So like my program, in fact, is called Portal. And the reason is, like, I think of a psychedelic, it's like a window or door, right? It opens, you get to see certain things, or know certain things, or feel certain things. And then you have to decide, am I going to walk through that door? Am I going to like integrate all of these things and change my life and who I am as a person, or how I operate, or how I think about things? That's really the beauty of the experience, and the potential is what happens afterwards.
Oh, absolutely. And we made that mistake. We found out the hard way. My husband, who's had a lifetime of addiction, We did an ayahuasca journey a year ago, and he purged and purged and purged and purged and purged. And he said he felt like that was, I mean, all his addiction his whole life out one night. We didn't integrate it. We thought, okay, he's cured. And for the most part, he kind of was, like, all the little addictions that he had gone for 8 months. And because we didn't integrate, we didn't put new, healthier habits in place, right? He relapsed. So it was a nice wake up call for us that you need to work with somebody who is also working really well on the integration part, because it's just like addicts when they come out of rehab. You can't go back and hang out with your old friends and go to the old places. Like, you've got to change your life. You got to change and break these patterns that kind of caused you to set you up for failure to begin with. So integration is so important part of that whole experience.
Yeah. And I would just say, when you say the word failure, I mean, failure is part of learning, right?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
like, I really think, we're in a world where like that concept of like failure, it just sounds like a terrible thing. And in fact, and obviously like nobody wants that, but it's also like how we get to wisdom, right? Is to screw up and to kind of backtrack, et cetera, is to be like, oh, like, this is what I really needed to do that I didn't do last time. Like, I learned these things, but now I know I need to do these things and this thing, or whatever it might be. So it's kind of, part of, I think, the process is giving ourselves a lot of grace.
That's
And
why
each
I
other.
have it tattooed on my forearm, is to remind myself on a regular basis, because I was my own worst enemy for the longest time. There was no grace for Heather.
Mm.
But you brought up a word that kind of sparked my interest, because you're talking to a bioenergetic company. You said quantum drops, you said quantum dosing. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so there's, right, like most people, they think of psychedelics and they think journeying or tripping or these big experiences where you're kind of, offline for a long time. And that's one way. And, there are a lot of studies on that. Then there's microdosing. Microdosing is a sub psychedelic dose. And I do kind of coaching and educating around that, where they take periodic doses that are very small. So you can go shopping, you can parent your kid, you can go to work, et cetera. But, shifts in mental health, shifts in all of those behaviors, integration, et cetera. And then there's quantum dosing. And quantum dosing is vibrational, right? It's so in the um, idea of master plants, there is this concept, right, that we talked about them as like grandmother, grandfather, mother, father. They're like revered family members, but they're beings. They're considered beings. And so I'm assuming that this audience is familiar with the idea of like biofield, right? This like biofield that we all have, and ours is something larger than just our physical selves. And it's measurable, right? We even know just the electromagnetic field alone is measurable 6 to 8 feet away from our bodies. Okay, so the idea of quantum dosing is that we get to be in the field, in a shared field with a master plant. That could be the ayahuasca plant. It could be through growing the plants. Like, I myself do grow an ayahuasca vine that's now almost 10 years old. I grow San Pedro cacti, I grow Brugmansia, I grow tobacco, I grow a lot of sacred plants, and I work with them, and that's part of how I experience them and their medicine. And I get messages even through doing that, not to consume them, but just as my service to them. Wearing them, right, is another way that you can quantum dose. But ultimately, one of the messages I got that was really strong from the plants when I was tending them was, why do people think they need to ingest us in order to experience our medicine? Show them another way. So here I am, I'm like a neurologist, and yes, I'm out of the box, but I certainly wasn't like, oh, let me come up with some new vibrational way to work with plants. But I thought, well, like, how would we help people have this medicine in a vibrational way, right? Where it wouldn't consume the plant itself. And so we developed these quantum drops, me and the plants. It's made with the plants in a ceremonial way, but not from the plants. So we have 3 that are released right now, which are grandmother, grandfather, and the children, okay? And grandmother is from the ayahuasca plant, grandfather is from the San Pedro cactus, and the children are from the psilocybe mushrooms, these magic mushrooms. They don't contain any plant compound. They're made totally vibrationally. We use the principles that are from Luc Montagnier, the Nobel Prize winner, who looked at how DNA imprints into water.
Mm.
So we developed this, but it's also made ceremonially with sound, with medicine songs, and with music of the plants themselves. So it's made with the vibrational medicine of the plant. And there is actually a precedent in indigenous community for vibrational medicine from the plant. If somebody's ever been in an ayahuasca ceremony, and I know you have, then they will have heard something called icaros. And the icaros are these songs that are sung by the ayahuasquero, the maestro of the ceremony. And they are not the composers of these songs. They, in their dieta with the plant, their training with the plant, which could be months and months or even years of time, the plants give them these vibrational transmissions and they sing them. They sing what's given to them. And every maestro has their own icaros. They're unique. Okay. And for anyone who's experienced these icaros, when you hear the song, you hear the icaros sung, it will make you feel a certain way. It can make you feel like you're going to vomit. It can make you feel like you're going to cry and cry and cry. It can make you feel like calm, like you're coming back into your body. Some ayahuasqueros, particularly in indigenous communities where it's not, in this kind of like more mestizo kind of way, they actually drink a little of the ayahuasca brew themselves, but don't give it to the people that they're healing. They just sing the icaros, and the people still have the same healing experience because the icaros, these vibrations, the vibrational transmissions of the plants, are considered equal in potency and effectiveness to drinking the brew itself, which is like really
That's absolutely fascinating. We talk
amazing.
about on this show all the time. That is the way our cells communicate, is through light, frequency, and sound. So you have captured 2 out of the 3.
Yeah. So no, and it actually is made at certain times of month or year, right? And so we do it with light, we do it with
Okay.
sound, and it's my medicine songs that I've been given from the plants. And we actually measure the music. There are devices that measure the oscillations of the plant and translate it to sound. So it's my medicine songs given from the plant and the plant's oscillations, certain times of day, certain times of month, in a ceremonial way, so that what we call it is ceremony in a bottle. And what ceremony is it's, you enter in one way, something happens, kind of unpredictable, like you cannot always predict exactly what's going to happen, and you come out in a new way. So people who experience quantum drops actually have these transformative kinds of experiences, and people write me essays, literally essays, not just testimonials, but entire really beautiful well, I guess they are testimonials and experiences that they've had. And I'll tell you one actually that happened at Mindshare last year. A doctor came to me and he said, "Oh, I think I want to try those, and I wasn't even really advertising them, but we kind of were
I know. I was like,
chatting.
how did I miss that?
Yeah, no, he was like, he said, "I really want to try that." He's like, I don't get it really, even though I had explained it for like probably an hour. He said, "But I trust you, and I want to kind of try this." And I was like, okay. So he takes them, he comes back and finds me the next day. And he says, "So I tried your drops, and I don't know if they did anything, but I'm feeling really good. I'm meeting great people. I kind of having good synchronicities." I said, "Okay, that's great." And he said, "Oh, and by the way, last night I built an altar to my father who died, and I bowed down and I prayed to him." And I was like, "Oh, wow." I said, "Have you ever done that before?" He said, "Well, no, but I'm Chinese and that's my culture, is we pray to our ancestors." He said, "But I've never done that before." I was like, "Well, do you have any altars in your house?" And he said, "Well, no, I married, a white woman, and we don't have anything Chinese in my house, so I don't have any altar there." He said, "But when I took the drops, I just felt so connected to my lineage, and I needed to do it. So I found a picture of my father and I put the drops next to him and I found something to sit on and I bowed down and I prayed." And he totally didn't connect it to taking the drops, but it was so profound the way it was sort of a by the way, like, "Oh, by the way, I don't know if it did anything." Like, okay. The experiences that people have been so healing, so amazing. And it really has shown me, I've gone really deep into the science on this now. I kind of did it backwards, right? Like I developed this with the plants and kind of with the guidance of the plants. And then I was like, I need to be able to explain this to people after I knew that it worked and helped people, and we did beta groups, et cetera. And ultimately, what I started to understand, and I think this is the language of this community, right, around this kind of bioenergetic way of operating, is that our DNA, and there's data, scientific data on this, that our DNA is our antenna. And indigenous people have been talking about DNA for a very, very long time. They talked about it in their creation myths around serpents and snakes and these ideas. And you look in indigenous art, even Egyptian art, and you look at the snakes, right? Like the healing snakes that are in the staff, right, that are used to represent healing and medicine. All of those are connected to this idea of DNA, and DNA transmits and receives information. And that is a lot of how we are experiencing a lot of this vibrational healing, which I really think is the future of medicine, frankly.
Oh, absolutely, 110%. Highly agreed. So where can people, this is the shameless plug time. So where can people find more information about you and these quantum drops? Like I'm thinking of my son right now, who's 20, who doesn't want to play around, mess around with psychedelics, but he's got some trauma and some stress and some anxiety. He came up to me a month ago and said, Mom, I took myself off of all 5 medications, but don't worry, I made sure to do it nice and slow. And I was thinking, kid, 5 medications in 1 month is not slow. Like you're lucky you're not in the hospital. So we're trying to look for alternative, methods to help support him. And I was like, oh my gosh, the children, like I have to, as soon as we get off here, I'm going to order some.
Yeah, no, that's the beauty, is that they're safe for people who are sober. Not everybody who's sober feels comfortable doing psychedelics. And so sober, they're safe for people who are medically fragile, who are on a lot of medications. I have children and parents who take them together. I've had even nonverbal or autistic kids, people who are super sensitive. All of these people can experience quantum drops and experience the benefits without having to go and, maybe not have to take the psychedelics because it's contraindicated for them, or they just don't want to, right? It's just not for them. So where they can find them is they can look on my website, Dr.Maya, DRMAYA.com. They can also go to quantumdrops.com, and just if you want to type in quantum drops, and they come as a set, the children, grandmother, and the grandfather. What I always tell people is put them in a beautiful place. Okay, when you receive them, don't leave them in a box under your bathroom sink or whatever, as some people have, and they've been like, gosh, this isn't really doing anything. I'm like, where are you keeping them? Because anything vibrational wants to be in a beautiful high frequency kind of spot, right? So you put it somewhere pretty. It could be like an altar if you make those, or you could just put it in a spot that's it's sacred, and make it your ritual to go. It doesn't mean you can't put it in your purse or put it in a bag, and people travel, it crosses through customs, it's gone through airports. It's not, you don't have to keep it only in one place, but it's just nice when you go to wherever you are, the hotel or the Airbnb or in your own home, keep it somewhere beautiful. And then you take whichever one is calling to you, or sometimes people will take all 3. I, at the beginning, thought no one should do that. I thought that was not good or not respectful or not safe. Anyway, it turns out it's wonderful. And for people who really want to have a kind of full potency sort of experience, you won't trip, you won't be altered in that way, but you will open your sensory gating in a way that you can perceive what you would not otherwise be able to perceive, right? There's a whole quantum reality array available to you. And when you talk about, Heather, being your own worst enemy, which we all can sometimes be, some of us more than others, and certainly it evolves hopefully over our own lives. But there is this way in which we don't see what we can't yet see. We can't hear what we can't yet hear, right? We don't have the capacity for that yet. So what these do is open us so that we're able to perceive our eyes, our ears, our heart, what we couldn't otherwise perceive.
Absolutely. Beautiful. On that note, so make sure to visit her to get your quantum drops. Like I said, I know I'm going to go order some of mine, but also to make sure that we visit wearenikki.com/podcast, enter in BioBeats for 10% off. And because we really love our customers, and a way we show appreciation is we give away a free Nikki watch, as well as a wellness suite of frequencies on every episode. I think it's like a $5.97 value. So you'll find more information on that in the show notes. Make sure to go sign up. Wanted to say a big congratulations to the August winners. You win a Nikki frequency device as well as the wellness set of frequencies. It's a $598 value. Congratulations to Milia Donley, Peter Sonneberg, Billy Schweitzer, and Cheryl Hutchinson. Congratulations. Keep listening and make sure that you're sharing, liking, and subscribing to this podcast as we continue to inspire and change people's lives for the better. You know, and don't keep us a secret. If you found something in this podcast interesting, fascinating, planted a seed, blew your mind open in some way, shape, or form, make sure to share it, like it, right? Subscribe. And also make sure to have a healthy day. Thanks for joining us.
There's a new word for wellness, Nikki. Nikki, the bioenergetic wearable designed to help you feel better and perform better. Other wearables just track how you're doing. Nikki is about helping you do better. Touch the Nikki screen to choose the frequency you want for what you want to do and how you want to feel. Nikki puts a personal wellness center in your hands and on your wrist. Be better. Do better. We are Nikki.com.
Hi everybody, my name's Colin and I've been using the Nikki Bioenergetic device for a while now. I find it really helps with my sleep and recovery after a hard workout and also helps with pain as well. Check it out.
Nikki puts a personal wellness center in your hands and on your wrist. Be better. Do better. We are Nikki.com. The views, information, and opinions expressed in this content are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of FreeMedica. FreeMedica Technologies, Inc. and its employees are not responsible, nor verifies accuracy any of the information contained in the following content. The primary purpose of this content is to educate and inform. This content does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services.